Good afternoon, everybody. How are you doing? I hope you enjoyed your lunch. This place has pretty darn good food, I think. Anyway, I'm Jackie Strauss, and it is my job to put these luncheons together, and I'm enjoying doing it. It's a lot more involved than I ever thought it was, but it's getting done. So anyway, I am just going to introduce the board of directors and the officers. So as I call your name, if you're here, if you're not here, don't worry about it. Would you please stand so we know who you are? Paul Big Bear. Paul Gluck. Bill Kelly. Laura Lewis, who is not here. Huh? Oh, she's here. Oh, my goodness. I'm sorry, Laura. Hooray. T. Morgan. Michael Nice. He is definitely not here, unfortunately. Steve Sachs. Brad Seekoff, who is also not here. Me. Steve Tatz. Art Wilson, who is not here, just had open heart surgery. God bless him. And Barbara Ann Zipiak. And the officers of the board are Eric Address, Jeff Benton, who couldn't be here today, Bill Gelhaus, who is also not here today, and our brand new chairperson of the board, Ms. Lee Richards. Come on up, dear.
Thanks, Jackie. The many hours that she and I are on the phone saying, who should we call? Who should we call to be on the program? So if you get a phone call, just answer it and be graceful. Anyway, so how did I become chairman? I left the room for 2 minutes. I came back, surprise! But anyway, it's an exciting year, and I'm glad that you are all a part of it. Simply by being with us today, you've shown us that you love Broadcast Pioneers as we do, and I hope that we'll see you again and again this year at the variety of programs that we have planned. If you have a great program idea, let us know. You know, something exciting, maybe something for the mind, something for nostalgia. I'd like to keep it interesting and varied. So it could be something that Ed Cunningham did at Channel 12 or whatever, or Tom LeMaine did, or any of you. Anyway, again, thank you for being here. I just finished my lunch, so I'm like still going like that, and the dessert hasn't come yet. The program today is very special to us as we celebrate the 60th anniversary of Broadcast Pioneers of Philadelphia. The history of the organization actually goes back many decades before that. And to tell us more about the program today, let me introduce to you our MC. Here's Ed Cunningham, longtime broadcaster. Thank you.
How can I bring this back up here? Well, I love it when I get assistance. Thank you. Perfect. You got it? Okay. Yes, hi. Welcome, everyone. I understand this is the second luncheon that we have had. Well, there have been a few, let's put it that way. Since the pandemic hit a couple of years ago, and just like every other organization, it has been greatly affected by that. But hopefully the worst is behind us. We don't really know that for sure. You never know that for sure. But let us hope and pray that all of the worst is behind us. And yes, we are here to celebrate 60 years. Can you imagine that? I mean, I was just kind of thinking before we came over what was happening 60 years ago. Well, I'll age myself a little bit by saying I was a junior in high school at that time. I do remember that the Cuban Missile Crisis occurred back in 1962. We weren't sure what was going to happen to all of us, but happily we pulled through. The Phillies were not very good at that time. Now, I know that you could say that most years, but I will tell you, I remember that the Phillies were getting better in that year and made a run for it in 1964 before ultimately being shot down. Some movies from 1962, Dr. No premiered that year. To Kill a Mockingbird was a wonderful movie from that time, a little social commentary. Lawrence of Arabia, one of the great film epics of all, happened in 1962. But more important than all of that, at least for our discussions today, is that, yes, as you have already heard, 1962 was the year that Broadcast Pioneers of Philadelphia was formed. And we're still going strong, 60 years later, pandemic or no. And the whole idea, of course, was to preserve the legacy of television and radio in our market, to preserve some of the artifacts, I mean, the videos and the audios of the great people who preceded all of us in the broadcasting field in the Delaware Valley. And it's just wonderful. Is there a particular gem that you have for the 60th anniversary? Does anybody know the answer to that? What is it? Something. Oh, there you go. Oh, all right. Well, I just learned something new today. Thank you, Pat. And so, yeah, it's been a great thing, and I know that we're going to be going on with the help of good folks like you for the future. And Jackie, in her new role as the matron of the lunches, has put together a lovely program today. A couple of disappointments along the way. I was telling Jackie earlier on what she has now discovered, that when you make big plans for an event, changes happen. And one disappointment was that Marsha Rose Shestak cannot join us. She told that to Jackie the other day. But I don't know, somehow I was particularly taken when we came in today when Jackie told me that Lisa Thomas Laurie cannot join us today. And I think all of us know the story of Lisa. It was the most popular broadcasters we've ever had in this town. I sometimes wonder what her Q rating would be. It would be way, way up there. Everybody always liked Lisa Thomas Laurie. But you know about this, what is it called? Poems is the name of the affliction that this poor lady has suffered through for literally decades. It took her off the air at Channel 6 for a while, back I guess in the 90s. She, trooper that she was, came back and went on for a while longer at Channel 6 before she retired just a few years ago. She was supposed to be on our panel today, but she called Jackie this morning to say that she is still undergoing chemotherapy for this Poems syndrome. After all of these years, this valiant lady is still working through it all. And because of a change of schedule with her doctor, it was supposed to be tomorrow that she got the treatment. It was pushed back to today. So we're certainly very sorry that Lisa cannot join us, but Jackie, I know we'll find a spot for her in the future. So anyway, but we still have a marvelous panel, most of whom are here, a couple of whom are not. We have with us Dave Abramson, Pat Ciarrocchi, Jerry Lee, yeah, you may, and Kathy Orr. And they're going to be chatting with us today about a couple of things. Jackie wanted to know, and I'll give them a little sneak preview of that. Should I bring the folks up now? Yeah, come on up, guys. Why don't you come up to the place of honor and join us for the occasion. While they're doing so, a couple of people cannot make it. Larry Kane, from whom we'll be hearing a little bit later, and there's a funny little story behind that, which I will tell you when the time comes. Also, Dory Lenz. And boy, oh boy, what a presence Dory Lenz has been. I'm told by Jackie, I didn't realize this, that Dory is 99 years of age. Yeah, you may applaud that, yes. She's currently living in New York. I scarcely need to tell you, come on around, Pat, that's all right. I've been upstage before, that's all right. Never better than by you, Pat. She's living in New York now. It's a little tough for her to get down these days. We know the story. She ran so many wonderful public affairs programs on Channel 29 and Channel 17. She has been a stalwart of broadcast pioneers for decades, good friend of my wife, Ellie. And also, she got friendly with Ellie in American Women in Radio and Television. So she is one of the great ladies of local broadcasting, and she couldn't make it today in person to talk about the things we want to talk about. But through the miracle of modern video technology and talented dudes like we have over here, we are able to bring you Dory, and later on Larry Kane, via video. So Maestro, if you will favor us with a video of Dory Lenz.
I wish I could be seated with the audience for real. I never missed a luncheon. I never missed hearing stories and learning things from other broadcasters. It was a treat to be with my fellow broadcasters, a treat. It was a love affair, really. In all the years I was at Broadcast Pioneers, and that is, I joined in the early 70s. So you know it's a long time. And I'm 99 now. Next year is the big one. Gosh, I'm kind of overcome seeing so many of my co-broadcasters lined up, all with our thanks for the pleasures of each other's company and knowledge. It's been wonderful. It's been a treat in every way. And I don't know what else to say, except that I'm grateful to be a part of this celebration. And we have so much ahead, so many goals ahead, so many things we haven't done that are there to be done by our membership. So let's keep at it. Let's keep going.
"99 years of age, Dory Lenz, and she is our first guest of honor of today. But as you see, our panel has joined us already. Pat, Dave, Jerry, and Kathy. Jackie had, I thought, a very good idea to have the folks here talk about during this luncheon, and that is essentially what Dory was just telling us about what this organization, as a professional organization, has meant to every single one of us over the years. So I'm going to ask each of them to chat about that a little bit. And I also thought it would be interesting, since we're kind of in an historic frame of mind today, to ask them what changes they've seen in this business of ours, which are legion, as we all know, that have happened throughout the years. So if you feel up to chatting about that, we will do so as we get started with our live panel. I've decided to do it alphabetically. I thought that was very clever. And you know what that means, Dave Abramson?
Yep.
That means you, my friend. Dave Abramson, one of the nicest human beings you will ever meet in the broadcasting business, whom I've known for some time. Oh, it's all true, Dave. Dave came to Channel 17, actually, from Rockford, Illinois, way back in the Stone Ages, back around 1980, to direct dancing on air. Is that right, Dave?
I came in from 10 years experience in Rockford, Illinois, a little CBS affiliate out there.
Yeah.
Came in as a staff director doing Time of Deliverance, a church show from North Broad Street at the time, dancing on air, directing commercials. I got to direct John Facenda's last insurance commercial for Colonial Penn.
Oh, man.
That's another story I'll tell later.
Well, there's so much more, though. I don't know what you consider your most important contribution, but I certainly do think of the Phillies. I really do, because for the longest time, what you saw in the stadium, you know, Fanavision that they used to have at the Vet, and now, of course, the beautiful video displays they have at Lincoln Financial Field. This is the guy who helped install all of them in the first place. So what that means is not that many people know Dave's face, lovely as it is, but they do know, if you've ever been to the stadium or watched the Phillies on television, as my wife and I do all the time, Dave's handiwork is behind it all. So Dave, we're happy to have you start along. So what do you think? This organization, what it means to you, I don't know if there's something else you want to add.
A good bar trivia question. Who was the backup stadium PA announcer for the Phillies from
You.
me?
That guy.
Danny Baker would be coming up through the elevator and getting through the crowds, and I'd introduce the first 2, maybe 3 batters till he got in there. I did that for 15 years, more than that.
That I did not know. Dave, that is very cool.
It's a good bar trivia question.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, so as I said, since we're in kind of, I don't know, nostalgic or historic frame of mind, but just let's start off by telling the folks what this organization, which is celebrating its 60th anniversary now, has meant to you personally in your career.
Well, Mother Lenz brought me in 1989 when I was 20 years in, which used to be the old rule. And all my life I've been a broadcast historian, a student of broadcast history, television history, old radio history, old equipment history. I collect and restore antique radios and television sets. And this was the perfect crowd for me to meet. This is 1989. You go back to 1949, these people were only 40 years removed from the first TV station in a city. And they were still in the club at the time, you know, the Shelley Grosses and the Pat and Carter Bryars, and down the line, just a ton of people I got to meet, got to learn a lot of history. And just, it's the whole historic thing, and I do what I can to, you know, help the club with projects. I did the banquet video editing for about 10, 12 years when we first started the whole thing, and then it just got too big. And that was about the time we were building the new ballpark, so I really had to pay attention to that thing. But it's just the great history in this room. You talk around, you know, somebody knew this one, knew that one. I was telling somebody earlier, I sat down for lunch one day at the old Williamsons where we met for about 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
And this gentleman, you know, up in years, introduces himself to me. He says, "Hello, I'm Ezra Stone." And I knew who he was. You know, I said, "Are you kidding me? Henry Aldrich?" He said, "Yes. How do you know that?" I said, "I study this stuff." He was the nicest guy I ever met. You know, it was the old radio show. Henry Aldrich, coming mother.
Wow.
He sent me, he'd starred in and directed a show in 1949 called, I just drew a blank, but it was a Broadway Hell's a Poppin' type. Oh, Fireball Fun for All. It was a Broadway show that they did for TV. He's telling me stories about that. 3 weeks later, an old kinescope copy on VHS came to my door from Ezra with a very nice note.
Well, that's great. Well, that doesn't surprise me, because I'll tell you, Dave is one of the friendliest people I've ever met in the business, and he gave my wife and me a very nice tour of Citizens Bank Park some years ago when we were there for, he treated us royalty, and we were very grateful for that, Dave. Dave, so you've obviously been, as I say, behind the camera in the technical end of things.
Yes.
Before you were retired, you were the chief engineer for the stadium for the Phillies. I can only imagine the differences in technology that you saw come into play. I mean, talk about Fanavision. I'm just wondering if you'd take a look back to tell us about how you've seen this industry change, I guess particularly technically.
When I started out, I was pushing a black and white TV camera in a studio. We owned one black and white, one color. Camera cables, were huge things. And color had only been around for about 10 years or so in any quantity. But over the years, I watched the equipment get smaller, but it was still the same television that went on the air in 1939 before the war. The fundamentals were the same. And then I started seeing digital equipment creep in very slowly over the years. The first digital stuff I saw was 1982 at Channel 17. But the tidal wave was coming, and it's here now. That camera in the dugout, to me, is a camera, and it comes up on a piece of copper wire, and you plug it in, and there's your camera. The one that's going to replace it, and they're rebuilding Fanavision over the winter here, which they have issues with already. That camera is now, it's a camera, but it's a server. It comes up on a Cat5 cable, like it's hooked up to your network computer at work. So that, in my case, when I saw that coming, I just said, it's time. I've got 50 years and 5 weeks in the business. I'm retiring. Good luck. Thank you very much. And I would be at IT 102 on a good day. Now I'd have to start all over from scratch on a whole new technology that I just wasn't paying attention to. But I saw the train coming at me, and I stepped off the tracks.
So you're ultimately retired, Dave, right?
Very retired. Thank you much. Stop out in Chester Springs and say hi.
All right. Well, just remember all the things that you saw, as I say, at the stadiums, as they came along. Dave's hands.
And most of it I can't tell you.
His hands were all over him. Dave, it's great. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention. I thought maybe we'd have a little Q&A after each of the panelists has spoken. So if there are any questions you have for either of them, let's hold on to them until the end of the proceedings. Thank you, Dave. Always good to see you, sir. Moving inexorably through the alphabet, I find myself looking at Pat Ciarrocchi, who is the C person here today. And I have to say, one of the classiest human beings ever to be on Philadelphia airwaves. And why not? She's a Philadelphia native. Multiple Emmy winner, Channel 3, for many programs and reports that she has done. I know, I've read about this, Pat, that a couple of the wonderful events that you remember so much were two occasions having to do with the church, at one of which was you covered the canonization of Mother Catherine Drexel.
I did.
St. Catherine Drexel now, and also reported in Rome on the death of Pope John Paul II. So those were very, very important moments, I know, for Pat. And as I say, a very classy person, all in all. If I may, by the way, she became a part of our Broadcast Pioneers of Philadelphia Hall of Fame in 2000 when she was a very little, young, tiny person. Just a very quick story with regard, getting back to the church. Some years ago, when they have a St. Vincent de Paul breakfast at our local parish, which is St. Monica's in South Philadelphia, they asked me to come along, essentially doing what I'm doing now, just to be your jolly host. And they said, do you know anybody, Ed, in the broadcasting industry who could be our special guest for the occasion? And my thoughts turned to Pat. So I called her up, and I could tell there was just a little something there. There was a little hint of hesitation. You guys had something planned. I forget exactly what it was. But she said, you know what? I'll come and do it. Don't worry about it. So I thanked you then, and I want to thank you publicly for that now, Pat, for being so gracious to us. That was a very big deal for us at St. Vincent de Paul on that occasion.
Well,
So,
I have to tell you, it was really a big deal when they told me that I was going to co-anchor the Mummers with you.
oh my gosh, that's right. Yes, I
We
had
did
a,
the string bands together, Ed and I. It was really fun, so fun. To be able to sit next to him for so many hours and to hear that voice in my ear, it was wonderful.
oh,
So-
Pat, you only say that because it's true.
It is
You know
true.
that, yes. Well, thank you,
Yes.
Pat. You are a dear, and that's very lovely of you. But less about me and more about you now. Again, as we did with Dave, and as we'll continue to do, why don't you just share some thoughts you have about this organization?
I was beyond honored to be inducted into the Broadcast Pioneers Hall of Fame, because I think I got into it just as the club had changed the rules. I think you couldn't become a Hall of Famer unless you were in 20 years, and I think I was in at 15. And it was a real thrill to be able to greet everyone, thank everyone, and to have that moment of being recognized for the work that I have loved to do, that I loved to do for so many years. So it was really funny. Robin McIntosh and Tom LeMaine and I were talking, like, how long have you been out? How long have you been out? How long have you been out? And for me, this year, it's 7 years. I know, it seems shocking, isn't it? And when I think about how many, I was at Channel 3 for 33 and a half years. And I was thinking, too, about, what are some of the secrets that make it work? And so I brought this to show you. The men really don't need this, but it says, all I need is mascara and coffee. When I worked the early morning, where I was up at 3 and on the air at 4:30 or 5 o'clock, that was it. The other thing, too, speaking of the church, did you know that there is a patron saint of television?
Yes, sir.
Saint Clair. Saint Clair helped me at a lot of different moments, especially when we were doing the extended coverage of Pope Francis's visit to Philadelphia.
Oh,
And we were on the air, I was on the air for 16 hours over a 2-day period. I mean, that's nothing for Kathy Orr when you got a big storm. She can do that without even thinking twice about it. But I kept thinking, how am I going to find the words? I asked St. Clair, she helped. So there's St. Clair. These are my friends from Broadcast Pioneers.
all right.
And just one other thing that struck me, and I remember really being a young journalist. I was in radio initially, and before I came to Channel 3, and I found myself reading different things about the history of television. And Edward R. Murrow, was someone who, learned more about. And I happened to find that famous presentation that he made to the directors, NTS, what was it, NTSC, Television News Directors Association in 1958, where he said something really profound. And I just wanted to read a couple of sentences of this because I thought it fit in with where we are. And he said this, this is fascinating, I do not advocate that we turn television into a 27-inch wailing wall where long hairs constantly moan about the state of our culture and our defense. But I would just like to see it reflect occasionally the hard, unyielding realities of the world in which we live. I would like to see it done inside the existing framework, and I would like to see the doing of it redound to the credit of those who finance and program. I thought that was fascinating, and I had never read that until this morning. This was the quote that I was seeking to share with you today. Television, this instrument, can teach, it can illuminate. Yes, it even can inspire. But it can do so only to the extent that humans are determined to use it to those ends. Otherwise, it's nothing but wires and lights in a box. There is a great and perhaps decisive battle to be fought against ignorance, intolerance, and indifference. This weapon of television could be useful. The wires and lights in the box always got me. The idea to illuminate and to inspire always got me. And I tried to bring that to the work that I did. And that's so much of what all of you who have been broadcasters and those of you who are behind the scenes, you took those wires and lights in a box and you allowed us to be the vessel. That was the vessel for the message. But then I thought the weapon of television could be useful. And isn't it fascinating how television has now been weaponized?
You're here.
So those are my thoughts. How have things changed?
Well,
You know,
yeah,
technologically, we know
Yeah.
what that's all
I
about.
wasn't going to ask you that because that's a tough act to follow, but please do go ahead.
Yeah, but that's the other thing too that I was really proud to do was to be able to present when we presented the Communicator of the Year award to Cardinal John Foley, and that was really extraordinary. That was a great moment. Bill Roswell and I put that piece together, and we had the great pleasure of being able to go and interview him. And he did the most beautiful acceptance speech. He took one deep breath and he started talking and was flawless with that glorious voice. So, Cardinal Foley, oh yeah. I also, before the papal visit here in Philadelphia, I asked the rector of the cathedral if I could go downstairs to the crypt where Foley is buried. He let me go down. I put my hand on his tomb and I also said to him, Eminence, just give me the words.
Bravo, bravo.
Thanks.
Nicely said, Pat. Thank you. I didn't think you'd be able to top what you read from Murrow, but you just did, so well done. Thanks, Pat, for those thoughts. Larry Kane is not here today, and there's just a wee little story. Jackie said it would be all right if I told it. I think he was planning initially to join us today, but as it turns out, his grandson is going to have his bar mitzvah very soon. And he is under strict orders, Larry, under strict orders from his daughter not to go anywhere or join in any groupings of people, I presume, because she doesn't want him to get sick and miss this big occasion. So Larry, obedient father that he is, obeyed his daughter, but agreed instead to send us a little video just before we play it. For if anybody doesn't know Larry, just a couple of things. I guess he's rightly called the dean currently of Philadelphia newscasters, even more so than Jim Gardner. I mean, he's the guy who helped launch Action News back in 1970, and from what I understand, it was his idea to say, but the big story is, they attribute that to Larry. Well, he began his career as a cub reporter in Miami, and he reported on the Bay of Pigs invasion. Could you imagine that all those years ago? And of course, is very famous for having traveled around America with the Beatles and writing about their adventures in this country, which he ultimately put into a book. He is anchored at the channels 3, 6, and 10, member of the Broadcast Pioneers Hall of Fame, as you can imagine. So he is not here, but again, Maestro, if you will do the honors, we will let video take care of that.
First of all, I've got to tell you, it's a pleasure being here with the company today. Some of the most distinguished broadcasters I've ever worked with and competed with. And I must tell you something, the reason the Broadcast Pioneers is so important, several factors. Number one, from the very beginning, 60 years ago, the Broadcast Pioneers brought the community together. I mean, we learned about each other. We found out that the imaginary competition really wasn't imaginary, it was real people who had the same anxieties, insecurities, and fears that we did. Broadcast Pioneers also brought the careers of so many people in the spotlight, where it actually gave people a chance to tell their stories to everybody else. And when we listened, I think we were kind of dazzled by it, knowing the real life stories of the struggles that many people went through. In addition to that, I think it kept alive a lot of stories about a lot of great people, and it brought us together as a community. We respected each other more, and we learned so much about the real people in the flesh as opposed to the imaginary competition. I remember talking to Will Ferrell one time about his movie Anchorman, and he said, what are some of the expressions that you use? And we used to say at Channel 6, at Channel 10 sometimes, we're going to just kill the competition. Well, he took it to a greater depth when he basically showed a fight in the street. So the word kill and fight became more of a real violent thing. Broadcast Pioneers has provided us with so much information about the business. It's been the organization's been just an absolute tonic for young people to learn about the business, where they were, what they wanted to do. And I just compliment everybody who belongs, who comes to the lunches. Unfortunately, since COVID, I've been very, very reluctant to come in contact with anybody for a while. But I just, when I look at the roster here, I mean, Pat Ciarrocchi and Marcia Rose and Kathy Orr and all these great broadcasters over the years, I just wonder and marvel at the resilience, the total immersion into the business, the respect for our community, and the way we act together and interact. So I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. I'm very, very proud of the materials that you put out over the years, some of which I've used for my own memories, some of which I've donated. And I just think it's fantastic that we have this kind of an organization. I noticed I was taken into the Hall of Fame in 1994, which is a long time ago. And then I think my last year at Channel 3, I was the Person of the Year. And I went to so many events, and so many of those long speeches, so many of those long drive homes. And my goal in life is to make the awards dinner fast, as fast as Channel 6 was at the beginning. And it's a pleasure to work with Brad to put this together and to talk to all of you once in a while. I miss seeing all of you, and hopefully we can get together soon and tell all war stories. There's one thing about our business that's incredible. I think we've come to the point where we really understand what it takes to succeed, and we have a respect for all the people at all the stations, at least most of them. I've met many great people in this business, and I work with a lot of jerks, but I will tell you, the people that are here today are great. It's been great to know the competition, and great to know that we made our mark in our day, in the past, and that the broadcasters of the future will make their mark. And I just want to tell you a quick story. When I worked at Channel 6, I came there at the age of 23 in 1966. The engineers came up to me and said, "You are coming to local television in the worst time possible. This business is going to hell in a breadbasket. It will die in a couple of years." And who would know that it would be the beginning of the greatest flourish of impact of local news. And when we talk about the future, by the way, about over the top being streaming, television can go away, but local news can never go away. And it's still the most important part of what television stations do. So congratulations. Thanks for being here. I wish I could be there in person, but I'm not, and hope to see all of you soon. Be well.
And in my never-ending effort to tie myself into our guests in every possible way I can, I should point out that Larry Kane was the host for an historical documentary we did at WHYY some years back about Jewish life in the Delaware Valley. He was gotten for us by Paul Gluck, as I remember. Paul, I think we can thank you for that. And Paul also came up with the title of the show, It's a Mitzvah. And the whole experience with working with Paul and Larry certainly was a mitzvah for us. So there you are. I can do the same thing next, too. Jerry Lee. Now, he may not remember this, but he used to be my boss for a while, but more on that later. I was thinking about this. I was putting together a few notes, and it seemed to me that when they coined the word visionary, I've always suspected they were looking at Jerry Lee. I mean, because that's exactly what this gentleman is. 1963, my word, can it really be almost 60 years ago? It certainly is. He and Dave Kurtz got together and started WDVR, which quickly became Philadelphia's #1 FM station. And it stayed that way and stayed through Easy 101 and B101 forever, so forth. And yes, I had a chance to work there for a little while, so I'm very honored about that fact. Let me put it this way, a list of all of his accomplishments, his honors, all of the responsibilities that he's taken on for government, for those who are less fortunate. I was looking at a list of it. If I were to read them all, we'd be here all afternoon long. I mean, his impact on the business and on our country has been really that profound. So I won't say it. Look it up. You'll see what I'm talking about. Currently, still with Spot Q services? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So he's still very much at it, and he's former president of Broadcast Pioneers, and needless to say, in our Hall of Fame. Jerry Lee, take it away.
Thank you. Actually, I really have a lot of fond memories about the Pioneers. Pioneers has been really instrumental in my life. It's hard to believe, but it is. Back in 1979, well, before I give you the story, I just want to whet your appetite with one thing. Because of the Philadelphia Broadcast Pioneers, I was invited to meet with Ronald Reagan in the Oval Office, directly because of what happened as I was president of the Pioneers. Because when I was president of the Pioneers, in those days, you were automatically on the board of the National Pioneers. And what happened one day, I get a call from a guy by the name of Don Mercer, who was the head of affiliate relations for NBC. He was a fellow board member, and he said, we'd like you to take over as president of the National Pioneers. And I said, I just have too many things on my plate. I just can't do it. So 2 weeks later, he calls back and says, the executive committee of the National Pioneers had just voted to close down the National Pioneers. And I said, okay, I'll do it. He said, if you're willing to take it on, we'll keep it open for a little while longer, because the place was going downhill. The National Pioneers was losing membership. They had very little money in the bank. So I took over as president, and I was managed in 2 years to put it on stable footing, and I got double the membership. And so we got it in good shape. And then I came up with the idea is, why don't we make Ronald Reagan a lifetime member of the Pioneers? So I went out and searched the country and found his original mic at WHO. And so I arranged to get to the White House and say, could you give us 10 minutes to make a presentation to make Ronald Reagan a lifetime member? They said yes. So we brought in 6 of our fellow board members to the meeting. And I'll tell you, it was incredible. Because, first of all, his handlers kept coming in saying, you're late for an appointment, you're late for an appointment. It went on for 45 minutes, and the reason for it is he wanted to tell us his famous story about broadcast baseball and how the wire went down. And he kept having a foul ball, another foul ball, another foul ball, another foul ball. He went through 19 foul balls before the wire came back. And he just went on, and he was telling story after story after story. And when that finally ended, the meeting ended, he sent me this incredible handwritten note saying what a delight it was. It wasn't me, it was the other 5 that were really interesting people. And that, but to be able to, and he thanked the pioneers from, because of my association with the pioneers, I ended up doing one other story on that. By being the president of the National Pioneers, I was also in charge of the Peabody Awards. And as a result, I was able to meet with some very famous people giving their awards. And one of those famous people was somebody you just mentioned earlier, tie-in, Lowell Thomas, who was famous for Lawrence of Arabia. And after he got the award and the luncheon ended, he comes back up to the stage and says to me, "That was the greatest introduction I've ever had in my career." And the little side note of that, I didn't write it, but I really felt good about it. So it was just a wonderful thing to happen. So anyway, there's a lot of good things have happened in my life because of the pioneers. And I'll tell you one big thing that happened that most people don't know about, and that is, the organization eventually, I was on the board for 35 years of the National. And then we eventually changed it into a foundation, the Broadcast Foundation of America. And our goal is to help broadcasters who fall in hard times. And for example, this past year we gave away $1.4 million to broadcasters who fall in hard times. And that would not exist today if when Don Mercer called me, if they had closed the organization down. And so I'm very proud of the fact that I was able to play that role so that we have all this money to help broadcasters. And one final note on that, little side note. Years later, I found out who Don Mercer really was. Besides being the head of affiliate relations for NBC, he was the father-in-law of Jim Thompson, who just died a few weeks ago. And I never knew that. So it was and Jim became president of the Broadcasters Foundation for about 7 years. And later on, I found out that, hey, the guy that originally twisted my arm to have me take over as national president was, a son-in-law. So anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Bravo, Jerry. I was thinking that when I mentioned, Jerry, that back in 1963, when you and Dave founded WDVR, that beautiful music format, I don't know if it's accurate to say that you guys invented it, but that was certainly a major breakthrough in FM broadcasting, particularly at that time when FM was looking to get a holding. So again, in the spirit of the occasion, since you guys made a major change of your own back in 1963, all those years since, what's the most significant thing you may have noticed that has changed about this industry that we are in?
Well, it's a very simple answer, and that's the rewrite of the Communications Act in 1996, when you could then the act permitted us to own many, many stations in the same market. And that changed the landscape of broadcasting. There's a little aside I like to put into that. The biggest broadcaster became Lowry Mays, Clear Channel. And Lowry just died this past week. And he was the biggest broadcaster of all. And every time we would run into each other, he would tell me the same story over and over and over again. He said, "Jerry, every time I testify in front of the Congress and they accuse me of monopoly, I say, you've never been to Philadelphia and met Jerry Lee. He beats all of our stations every time. We've never been able to beat him in Philadelphia." And he kept talking. I don't know how many times over the years he's told me that story. And anyway.
Thanks, Jerry. Again, in keeping with my slavish efforts to tie myself with these people, as I mentioned, Jerry was my boss for a while. He didn't get a chance to see me very often. I was mostly doing weekends on DVR, then Easy 101. But I'll tell you, with regard to that, it was thanks to Jerry Lee that I went to the coolest Christmas party I have ever attended in my life. It was at his home, and the staff was invited over there to join him for a Christmas party. Now, I presume you guys all know the motion picture Goldfinger, right? James Bond and all of that. Well, as the party was going along, Jerry said, "All right, guys, come on, come down to my garage. I want to show you something." So we all trooped down, being loyal employees. He opens the door to the garage, and there before us, we beheld the Aston Martin that was used by James Bond in the motion picture Goldfinger, with the machine guns and the oil slicks and all the other stuff, including the ejection seat in which the bad guy would go right out of the car, and that was the end of the bad guy. And it was that car. And I was just thinking, I don't think, Ellie, you were able to join me that night, how much you would love to have seen that very automobile. It was so cool. I found out later that Jerry sold that car for charitable purposes, but you can't get much cooler a Christmas party than beholding the James Bond car from Goldfinger. Thanks, Jerry, for those thoughts. I can't say, Kathy Orr is the one person I can't say I've had the honor and pleasure of meeting. So hi, Kathy.
Hi.
It's nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you.
Yes, indeed, and it's good to have you with us. Even so, Kathy is indeed a Broadcast Pioneers member of the Hall of Fame. And she has really been calling the weather for channels 10, 3, and 29 over the years. Also, a very popular feature that she did. Was it for Channel 3 or at the Shore? Was that
Yes,
that was Channel 3?
And Fox.
Yeah, and Fox as well. About environmental situations at the Shore, which I know she loves very much. And she has been a major presence, and I can certainly think of a question I would ask, I'll leave it to you to get started, about changes in the industry. I'm sure, I know a lot of that has to do with the weather. So anyway, but this is your moment, so Kathy Orr, good to have you with us. Tell us about your thoughts of Broadcast Pioneers.
Well, it's wonderful to be here honoring 60 years, and I had such the pleasure of meeting new friends and my old friends at CBS. It's just been a wonderful afternoon, so congratulations on 60 years. It's been wonderful. I came to Philadelphia in 1998, and I'll never forget being here the night before, and I watched the weather before I had my interview with NBC 10, and I was watching Channel 6, and they were still using the magnetic board. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. You know, it's
Those
1998.
happy little clouds, right?
But it worked, right? It worked. After I started working at NBC 10, which of course I worked with Hurricane Schwartz and John Belaris and Bill Henley, and just an amazing team to start off with in a new, very big city with a helipad in the backyard. I mean, it was big time, coming from Syracuse, New York, which was my home and where I worked for 8 years. And I remember hearing about the Broadcast Pioneers and joining, and having the senior members of the team being Terry Ruggles, Sheila Ellen Stevens, Bill Baldini, like all taking me under their wing. You know, oh, you need to do a story about the pumpkin patch because it's going to be cold or whatever. Go here. Like they would tell me where to go. It was just really a warm feeling, and feeling like I was actually from Philadelphia. Now fast forward 24 years later, you know, I'm a lifer. You know, my kids have born here. They're going to stay here. I'm going to stay here. It's just been a wonderful, wonderful experience. And it's definitely changed a lot. I mean, I joined the Broadcast Pioneers, and I remember when the rule changed, Pat, because I was like, oh, I got to be on 20 years. I hope I make it. And just being so honored being inducted into the Hall of Fame, and watching so many of my colleagues, my older colleagues, being inducted, and hoping that someday I would be able to earn that. When I came to Philadelphia, I was the first female meteorologist with a BS degree to be on the air. So in that right, I thought, well, gosh, I guess I am a little bit of a pioneer. And that was in '98. And you would have thought that was kind of late for that, but still in the field of what I do, there aren't still that many women in this role. You'll see a lot of women on TV, but actually that have the credential. So it's grown a lot, it's changed a lot with the technology. Of course, in recent years, everybody's gotten those big giant boards to do the weather on, right? And they wanted to get rid of the chroma key. And I'll never forget, at Fox, we're redoing the whole studio, and I'm like, you cannot get rid of the chroma key. You know, you can do so many things, like it's a staple, you cannot get rid of it. And they're like, okay, we'll put it over here. And a lot of the new technology with weather, you use the chroma key, believe it or not. So it's interesting how those older technologies that are great and don't need to change, we have to hold on to because they work, and they work in many situations that some of the new technologies can't. Some of those touch screens don't work all the time. And we've seen it on national television, we've seen it on, so there's a lot of great things that we have that haven't changed and shouldn't change. So we have to hold on to the past and those great technologies that we've had and those best practices, like those great reporters and anchors, like our Pat Ciarrocchi. We were talking about this, just, people being in the workforce longer and having a work ethic. The work ethic that we have all had over the years, you don't see as much anymore. And a dear friend of mine that I worked with for years and now is in New York had once said, I tell young people in the business, do this if there's absolutely nothing else in the world you would rather do, because there's great sacrifice. And we do it because we love it. And we are offering the public a service, and we love providing that for them. And that's why Broadcast Pioneers has always been such a joy and a privilege for me, because when we talk shop, is there anything like a room of TV people? There's nothing, and if you're not in TV, you might be a little bored sitting there, but it's fascinating, and we love talking about it, love hearing about the stories. I was just telling TL, because we worked together at CBS for years, just the good old days. I think I miss the good old days. They seem to be like in the 70s.
I was there for the good old days.
You were there. Yeah, and it's, but it's changed a lot, but it's still, it's about the people. You can go from a different station to another station, and then you still make great friends and you have great relationships because you have that bond. And you gravitate toward those people who are really into producing great television. And that's always been the joy, no matter if I was at NBC, which I loved, and my friends at CBS, like Pat and Robin, TL, who I worked with for years and loved, and now, making new friends at Fox. But it's a progress and it's a journey, and, I hope to be doing it for quite a while longer in Philadelphia. So thank you. It's just a joy to be here.
And Kathleen, let me just mention, just to talk about how things have changed, and I think I keep saying technologically, I remember the older people here, if there's anybody older than I am, will remember the name Bill Hart, who was a long-time broadcaster at Channel 10, and in the matter of the day just did everything that was needed, including the weather. And I was a copy boy, this is back in the late 60s, and I remember one time asking him, I said, Bill, how confident are you in those 5-day forecasts that you do for us? Do you think they're accurate? And he looked at me, he didn't say a word, he just went like this. That was his answer. And I said, well, okay, and I believe that. But I do believe, unless I'm wrong, I don't think that's the case anymore. It seems obvious to me, and I've seen this happen so many times. You guys do 5, 6, 7-day forecasts, and you could pretty well count on them. Doppler radar and all that? I mean, would that be correct to say, Kathy?
Yeah, it's gotten much much more accurate. I mean, I started in the 90s and then going through the late 90s and the early 2000s. And then, of course, with Doppler radar, we started NBC 10 at Doppler 10,000. At CBS, we had Mega Doppler 3 at Channel 6. I forgot what they called it. Whatever the radar, but everybody came out with the new names, right? But the Doppler radar has even improved since those years, and there are new features. As a matter of fact, I just did a weather special, and it was about tornadoes, because this past couple of years, obviously, we've had more tornadoes in our area than many places across the country. And there's something called the correlation coefficient that wasn't on the old radars that is now, and it helps us see debris. So we can say, oh my gosh, like this tornado is even stronger than we thought, because we can see this now that we couldn't see before. So we can warn people ahead of time and say, there's a tornado on the ground, and not only is it on the ground, but the National Weather Service can say, this is like a dangerous storm on the ground, and it's heading here. And that helped a lot of people in that Mullica Hill tornado that then went on to Deptford and then continue toward the north. So that technology, yes, and it is going to continue to improve. As far as our weather forecasting, our computer modeling, yes. Our education of our meteorologists, yes, having more meteorologists. And be able to be in a television market for the broadcast meteorologist long enough to know the biases of these computer models. Everybody's gotten savvy, and they'll hear us say, okay, the American model and the European model. And, you know, we're not talking about, you know, those runway models. But everybody is savvy to that now, so we talk about it, right? But the importance is being able to interpret it and watching it all winter, knowing the biases and knowing those Philadelphia biases as well. We always know that rain-snow line. You know, the rain comes into the shore, and then what about the I-95 corridor? There's all these idiosyncrasies of our topography, because of where we live, the ocean impact, that play into our weather. And I think, you know, you learn that by living here, forecasting here, and there's certain things you can't learn on an app. And, you know, we push our apps, like our managers want us, go to the app, go to the app. I'm like, why are we telling them to go to the app? But, you know, I had a manager come in and say to me, okay, the app says it's going to rain this afternoon. I'm like, it's not going to rain. And then she came in like 15 minutes later and was like, okay, the app took it off. I'm like, yeah, I just told you it wasn't going to rain. But, you know, those apps can't keep up with us, you know, because we're the ones that are actually doing the work. But, yes, forecasting-wise, it is definitely improved. The computer models are improving. The information going into them is improving. And I think we're living in a very fortunate time, especially with the, you know, global weather changing. And that's another thing. We have meteorological models, but we talk about the warming of the earth and climate change. The climate element for us is imaginary, but we know that it's there, like imaginary, like it's not something that goes into the algorithm of a computer model to help us forecast. So we know anytime it rains, it's going to pour. Like we know that there's a supercharged atmosphere that we have to allot for that as well. So we can't ignore that when we're forecasting storms. And that's something that we always have to keep in the back of our head professionally.
And doesn't that Doppler radar look cool on the air?
Yeah,
I mean, it is just meant for television
Yeah,
and
it
the
is.
graphics we have these days. Just a very quick last thing on that. I can remember, we all remember, Superstorm Sandy, a terrible storm from 10 years ago, I guess it is now. And I can remember to this day, about a week out before it arrived, that this storm was starting to form off the west coast of Africa, I suppose it was, and took that trek across the Atlantic. And 1 week out, the forecasts were saying it's going to hit, and it's going to hit in southern New Jersey. They were able to pinpoint it that perfectly. So again, another example, even in the last 10 years, of how that technology has improved. Kathy, thank you for joining us. A pleasure to have you with us. And as I promised folks before we adjourn for the day, I mean, come on, let's have a question or two. Anybody want to try? Ed?
I can remember the days that Ciarrocchi and some other people were running the newscast or doing the newscast, Paul Glock certainly would remember this too. Television, it seems to me, these are not the good old days. Television has changed, and the question I have for Pat is, something's missing, as far as I'm concerned, in today's television. Among them, investigative reporting. Maybe it's news budgets. News directors don't have the budgets they used to have. I'd like to ask Pat what you think. Is television just hunky-dory, or has it gone locally downhill?
Well, frankly, I don't watch as much now that I'm not participating. I certainly am interested in the news, and because you know, I never can tell when somebody's going to call me and say they need me for a noon live shot. So, I mean, not that I'm asking for it, but it's just, you know, your head kind of works that way. You know, I always have felt that there just wasn't enough money to support or commitment to support those kinds of investigative projects. Or even specialty areas. I mean, certainly at all the stations, there's a commitment to covering medicine and health. And there has been, you know, obviously you look at sports, but even locally, there's not even a full commitment to covering politics in a special way, which would be valuable. But, you know, it always has to do with money, and it always has to do with what companies are going to earn, and then with what they earn, what they can pay talent, and what they can pay all the support staff to be able to put it on. You know, one of the things that I think that, you know, I mean, listen to Kathy. I see my great friend, Robin McIntosh, and my other really wonderful on-air friend and partner for so many years, Tom LeMaine. And there was a comment about the service that we give. I think we all felt, as we were working, that we were providing the service. You know, you certainly had to be aware of a general manager who was in charge or a news director who was in charge, but I had really made a commitment that my audience was going to be the audience who would become my constituency and would vote for me in the morning by turning on the TV. And having that relationship, which I know the four of us had over these years, it was that commitment that keeps Kathy on the air, that has kept us on the air, and had us develop these wonderful relationships with the audience. So I don't know, does that answer your question, give you context?
Well, yeah, and one thing I may add, and this is maybe a subject for an entirely different luncheon, because it could be a big one, but I'll just jump in and ask this. We've seen headlines recently, I think it's NBC, has been discussing the possibility of giving up the 10 o'clock time slot on national broadcasting and turning them back to the stations. Mm-hmm. And it was a very intriguing report. And I wonder if that might even answer the question in some way. This might, who knows, be an opportunity for more stuff from the stations, perhaps even more in depth.
And I don't quite understand the streaming and how you support that effort. You know, again, you know, we're broadcast pioneers. Sometimes I feel like I'm a broadcast dinosaur. So you know, I don't quite understand that. But, you know, I think that there really is a need for information. And I think we always have been, I know my commitment always has been to telling the truth and to be as balanced as I could be in any presentation. And even in the presentation of the presentation, to be as balanced as I could be in my work. So, you know, we don't always see that now, and that's often caused, I think, I mean, you would agree with this, I know, because of cable television and having to fill the time. Mm-hmm. That's what, that became the game changer.
And you're certainly seeing a transition from over-the-air broadcast to now streaming, NBC this, Peacock that, whatever, over to cable. At some point you have to ask, when does a network not need a local affiliate anymore? Where's the tipping point?
Yeah, as I say, this could be a subject for maybe even a couple of luncheons. It has the possibility for such a major impact. Anyway, what else, folks? Questions, thoughts? Jackie?
Oh, you're welcome.
Kathy just stared at you like, what is she talking about?
Oh, I know. Enjoy today, because it's all going to go downhill from here.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen.
What kind of outside interference do major companies that own stations have? So, like, for example, Comcast owns NBC Universal. Like, are they directly affecting our local station? Like, what kind of, like, so does Disney?
You mean editorially?
Yeah. Like, what kind of influence do they have? Like, I think, if I'm not mistaken, locally, does Disney own Fox now?
No, Disney owns ABC.
ABC.
Knew that, but so when Disney bought Instat, it was it's like they own Hulu, right? They also own ESPN. But I heard that Fox News would stay, would run by itself, but the local news would then be under the ownership of Disney.
Oh, we're not yet. No. It's like the Fox News stations, Fox Sports, and Fox News is separated from 20th Century Fox in the film industry. So we split like a couple years ago, but right now, no, different owners. I mean, you can see how ABC and Disney, they do a lot together as far as a company. And, Comcast and NBC, I mean, it's Comcast Sportsnet does their sports now. Their sportscasters have contracts with Comcast
They
Sportsnet,
branded the
not
stuff.
necessarily NBC. So there is some integration there, for sure.
In all the years that I worked in news, and in major market news, 33 and a half years, I never was asked to change a point of view of a story based on any corporate order or from the sales department. Just change it a little bit, or maybe it can be turned in this direction or that direction. I was never asked to do that. And I'm not aware of any case where anybody was asked to do that. I might have been naive, but I was not.
Thank you. Anyone else? We're maybe time for one question, and we have to adjourn. Anyone going once? Going twice? Thank you, folks. It's been a pleasure to have you all with us.
Thank you.
Great pleasure to see you.